I work hard to earn my pay, and I saved real big today at All-American Ford.
Hey everyone, it's Jason Savino, the Marketing Director for the All-American Auto Group, and this is episode number 4 of the All-American Auto Mall in Old Bridge Updates podcast. This episode is going to be dedicated to talking about the Ford Bronco. I'll go into the history of it, how reservations and orders are going, and then when we could finally get to see one in person in our showroom. So to recap last week, we had Jim Raffone from Jar of Hope on. He was our guest, the first guest of this podcast, and he was fantastic. He talked about the Mustang that he's raffling off for his cause, which we donated to Jar of Hope, a beautiful 2020 Ford Mustang Convertible. You could still buy the raffle tickets. They're 100% of the proceeds go to Jar of Hope, so it's a full donation. And those tickets will be on sale until November 23rd. So you just have to go to jarofhopemustang.com. And then he also discussed his Washington, D.C. to Old Bridge, New Jersey walk, which is a 260-mile journey that he's taking all on foot. With no luxuries, no hotel rooms or anything like that. He's going to be sleeping on the side of buildings along his way. It's an 8-day trek that he's taking, and it's all to raise awareness for Duchenne muscular dystrophy, which, of course, him and his foundation are fighting to find a cure for. So he was fantastic. I recommend you looking into our episode number 3, which was on September 17th, to get his full remarks on all of the upcoming Jar of Hope stuff. Okay, so before we get into the Bronco deep dive, just have some pretty exciting news to announce personally with me. So I've been asked to join the Chamber of Commerce serving Old Bridge, Sayreville, and South Amboy. So it's our local Chamber of Commerce here. They voted me on to the trustees, so I'm part of their trustee board now. And it's a great honor. I'm very excited about it. I know a couple people who are on the board right now, owners of local businesses, great contributors to our community and to charity events that we do as well. So I think it was just kind of them knowing me through the community, knowing that All-American Auto Group does so much for the community and so much for charities. And we're kind of innovative, I'll say, with some of our events that we do. Mostly because of some of our partners with Jar of Hope. Like I mentioned, Jim Raffone was on last week, and some of the stuff that he comes up with and then we help him execute has been fantastic and has gotten rave reviews from the community. So the Chamber of Commerce asked me to serve, and then they voted me in, and I'm very honored. I went to my first grand opening of a local business here in Old Bridge the other day. It was the Tractor Supply Company, which is on Englishtown Road. So if, from our dealership, you go down Texas Road, then make a turn onto Englishtown Road by the Wawa, and it's right there. It's a beautiful store, beautiful location. I met the manager, Mike, great guy. He actually, as it turns out, is a customer of ours. He gets his big F450 truck serviced here with us. And he had great things to say, so that was always good to hear, of course. And he was just a nice guy. I met him and his wife. They took me around for a tour of the store, and then with the rest of the Chamber of Commerce, of course. And then we cut, their grand opening ribbon. It was all posted on Facebook. It was a really cool event. I highly recommend checking out their store. It's definitely different. I had not heard of a Tractor Supply Company store before this. I know they're a chain. I know they're popping up all over New Jersey, or at least now I'm starting to notice them more and more. But it's a cool store. It's almost like a smaller Lowe's or Home Depot, but they have a lot more stuff for like farmers, I guess. And then just a lot of cool stuff that, I don't think you would expect to find in a Lowe's or Home Depot that, anybody could use. So I highly recommend checking it out. And if you go over to that one, say hi to Mike. And tell him that Jason from All American Ford sent you. So we're talking all about the Ford Bronco now, and obviously the excitement level from our staff, from a dealership perspective, obviously from Ford Motor Company, and then all the enthusiasts out there, because the Bronco really does have this cult following. Pretty interesting from my standpoint. I thought that the Ford Ranger had a cult following. And, when they started to talk a couple years back about bringing it back and how that would go, and, the different logistics that went into bringing it back. And then once it was here, customers were able to reserve it for a short period of time, and a handful did. It wasn't that crazy. And then once it hit the showroom, it did do very, very well. And it still continues to do well. It's eating up market share, which is exactly what Ford Motor Company wanted to happen. So it was a really good launch, and I had thought that was a cult following. Now, if you compare what this Bronco reveal and this Bronco launch has been, they don't even compare. The Bronco cult following is about 100-fold, if not more, of that than the Ford Ranger. So we took in, like I said, a handful of reservations on the Ford Ranger. For the Bronco, within the first couple of months, once they did the reveal, which was back in, I believe, June or July, once they did that reveal, I think we got hundreds of reservations within that first couple months. And now, throughout our whole auto group, it's well in the hundreds. And so the excitement level with this product is just unlike anything I've ever seen. So when you talk about a cult following, I don't think there's anything like it in the automotive industry. I know probably some Ford haters out there would probably disagree with me, but I'm going to go with it. This is it's a situation where it's just been building for years and years and years, and it's finally back. And I think Ford has done a really good job up until this point with it. So, now we just have to get to the launch. It's got to get to the showroom. Customers have to feel it, touch it, drive it. And I think it's just going to be incredible. So the new Bronco family is actually 3 models for the 2021 model year, which is the next one coming out. So there's going to be a Bronco Sport, a 2-door Bronco, and a 4-door Bronco. So let's tackle the Bronco Sport first. So all 3 of the models you've been able to reserve for a $100 refundable deposit on Ford.com or through our website. It takes you to the Ford.com reservation portal, and you just select our dealership. And so the Bronco Sport, we took in a lot of reservations initially for it, a lot of excitement around it. That is able to be ordered now. And, customers can go in, they could build it, they could order it, they could put in their payment information. And that is going to be delivered to our dealership probably around December. It got delayed with COVID and the production and the factories being shut down, like everything. So we're hoping we see the Bronco Sports by December. We'll have stock units, and we'll have the orders that customers have placed up until this point. The Bronco 2-door and 4-door, for those, right now you could reserve them for that same $100 refundable deposit. And their build and price site is actually going to go live in October, which is exciting because initially we didn't think that it was going to be live until December. So Ford has kind of pushed it forward a little bit, I think, because of the excitement and to kind of hold that momentum. So in October, and I'll talk about it more as we get closer, you'll be able to go onto their build and price portal for the Bronco 2-door and 4-door. So you'll be able to select some options, compare pricing on those different option groups. And then, you reserve it, you save that information, you could print it, and then the actual ordering portal for the Bronco 2 and 4-door will begin in December. So it's definitely behind the Bronco Sport in terms of, the ordering process and when it will be delivered to the dealership. So just kind of keep that timeline in mind. So then in December, the Bronco Sport will start to arrive and become available for purchase at the dealerships. And that is also in December, when the Bronco 2-door and 4-door, you could begin ordering it. So you won't see the Bronco 2 or 4-door until probably spring of 2021. That's what Ford has, released so far. Again, we'll see. There's a lot of factors that go into it, but we're hoping by early spring 2021 is at that point when we'll have all 3 models within this Bronco SUV family. The history of the Bronco is really interesting to me. I mean, I'm a little on the younger side in terms of when the Bronco stopped being produced. I obviously wasn't at an age where I was driving or even really, was paying attention to automobiles at that time in terms of the models and what type of vehicle I was in. So to me, the Bronco, was a little bit before my generation. But the history is very interesting, and I love history as a subject. So I read up about it. I mean, Ford right now is pushing a lot of the history of it. They have a podcast out that's just dedicated to Bronco. I highly recommend it. It's very, very well put together. But I'll kind of go through the history real quick, and then we'll get back into the new Bronco that's going to come out and why we're excited about that. So obviously, the Bronco came out in 1966. That was the first one. That was the first generation. It was considered the original Ford all-purpose vehicle. And there was 3 models, much like the 2021 family of Broncos, right? So 3 different models. There was the Bronco Roadster, which had no roof, no doors. You could purchase doors and a convertible top as optional equipment. It had the Bronco Sport Utility, which had a short steel roof and roll-up windows. And then the Bronco Wagon, which was a full-length roof, still 2-door, and roll-up windows. And really at the height of this first generation of sales was 1974, when they sold about 26,000 units. So that first generation ran from 1966 to 1977. Then you move on to the second generation, and this is where it really started to get popular. And so in 1978, they really made the Bronco bigger. It was on a larger platform, the body style sharing components with the F-Series truck at that time. And sales, reached a record level, and they were just astronomical compared to how they were in the early 70s. So sales in 1978 and 1979 were at 78,000 and 104,000. So again, compared to in early 1970s when it was just at about 25,000. So literally 4 times the amount of sales per year was happening towards the end of the 1970s. I mean, another big event that happened in October of 1979, this famous moment for the Bronco when it kind of became known as the Pope Mobile, was when Pope John Paul II came over to the United States, and he was in a modified Bronco. So, you'll hear more as I go on that the Bronco had some of these historic pop culture moments that, made it even more popular than it was at the time. So the third generation was from the period of 1980 to 1986. And Ford considers that the time where, it went from the trail to the interstate. So it got more comfortable for the consumer. They brought in the target audience for it. It wasn't just about that off-road. It was about, becoming more luxurious, more comfortable. They boosted the fuel economy. That was a big part of it. They made the ride a little bit smoother. So that third generation, for those 6 years, sales did okay. They hovered around 40,000 units. In 1986, towards the end of that generation, they jumped up to about 62,000 units per year. So it really wasn't, it wasn't the height of the Bronco, and it wasn't the low point. So in 1987, they came out with the 4th generation of the Bronco, and Ford calls this the aerodynamic age, where other manufacturers were really emphasizing aerodynamics at the time. It was, kind of that big buzzword back then with producing these vehicles and redesigning them. So you went from kind of a more boxy version of the Bronco to, the sculpted edges and just better looking design. There was new powertrain options, new safety upgrades. And the height of that period in terms of sales was in 1989, when there was almost 70,000 units sold. So still very high up there in terms of sales in the late 1980s there. Then you move on to the 5th generation, which to this point, the 5th generation was the final generation created. And that was from 1992 to 1996. And they really went they tried to go back to the original body style. They paid some homage to the original. But while doing that, they upgraded the looks. They kept upgrading the aerodynamics because that was still a big thing. Obviously, they advanced safety features and safety innovations for back then. They made the interior more stylish. So they made a lot of changes with that 5th generation. And sales at that point in the early 1990s had really started to slow and go down. And it was a product of the times and just that style of two-door SUV. That two-door SUV, no matter what it was, the Bronco or any of its competitors, everything was kind of changing over to that four-door SUV and the bigger vehicles for the families. So, sales were decreasing. They were down to about 35,000 units per year by 1996, which was the last year the Bronco was made back then. So it was just the times, right? It's a different style, much like how now, although it's not a great comparison, but almost how now with Ford announcing that, it was kind of giving up on sedans in terms of, stopping producing them because everybody is going from sedans to small SUVs and then big SUVs. So it's almost just that change in style, change in preference, change in consumer preferences. Again, not a great comparison, but back then in 1996, it was still extremely popular. It still had a huge cult following. And so people were confused about it, much like, there were some people who were confused about, why Ford would ever want to get rid of the sedan. And I'll go into that in a whole nother episode, to be honest with you, because that whole sedan thing was, interesting and there's a lot of layers to it, much as I assume, was the case in 1996 when Ford decided to get rid of the Bronco. So really what happened in 1996 was that Ford wanted to switch over the manufacturing from that two-door SUV, which was the Bronco, to the four-door SUVs, the Ford Explorer and the Ford Expedition, which honestly, absolutely killed it in the 1990s and the 2000s. The Ford Explorer, continues to be one of the top-selling SUVs in the country. And the Ford Expedition, is fantastic as well in terms of a larger size SUV. So it's interesting. You could dive deeper into 1996 and the actual decision. People are still puzzled by it. People are still upset by it, but you kind of get it and you kind of see why the customer was changing their preference and how Ford tried to keep up with that. And that was kind of their decision at the time. And one interesting thing, obviously I can't talk about the Bronco without talking about the Oj Simpson chase, right? So I think a lot of people don't realize the timeline of things because you still find a lot of articles online that ask the question, did Oj Simpson kill the Bronco? And his chase happened in June 1994. And, Ford obviously defends it, and a lot of people do that. There's no way that Oj Simpson and that chase and the publicity from that had anything to do with Ford canceling the Bronco. Basically, demand and sales were already starting to fade at that point in the early 90s for the two-door SUV. And it's interesting because sales went up the 2 years after that chase. So in 1995 and 1996, sales were going up from 1994. So it's just a funny little thing within the Bronco history, that Oj Simpson chase and how polarizing that was and how much it still is. And the funny thing with that Oj Simpson chase, it still has affected pop culture to this day. So a pretty funny occurrence, and Ford called it a coincidence. I don't know if it was or not, but the Bronco was scheduled to debut in the spring of 2020, right? So that was their original plan from the past couple of years. That was Ford's timeline, but it got pushed back because of COVID and everything was delayed, right? So basically, they made the official unveiling of the Ford Bronco on July 9th. That was their schedule. And it drew immediate attention from the media because that's Oj Simpson's birthday, July 9th. Again, Ford came out and said it was a coincidence, and, they ended up moving the reveal back or forward to July 13th. But it's just funny that, I don't know if at Ford, they kind of knew that was going to happen and they wanted more attention from it. How did they not know that that was Oj Simpson's birthday? Like, you would have thought somebody would have maybe looked that up or somebody would have realized that. So I think that's a funny tie-in to this whole history with Oj Simpson. And he was, at the very end of the Bronco run in the mid 1990s. And, it still came up now in 2020. So very polarizing in terms of the pop culture aspect of it. The last part about the Ford Bronco that I wanted to bring up was some of the cool things that are coming out with this 2021 Ford Bronco family. So Back when they announced a lot of this stuff, I've written a blog article on our All American Ford and Old Bridge website titled The 7 Coolest Things About the All New 2021 Ford Bronco Family. So I just kind of wanted to talk about some of those. And if you're more interested in it, definitely head over to our website under the About Us tab in the navigation. You could find a link to our blog, and you'll be able to read the full blog article. So the first thing that I wanted to call out in terms of the coolest things about the new Bronco family was obviously you had to start with the throwbacks to the original, right? So Ford did some obvious throwbacks like the signature round headlamps, the horizontal grille, the short overhangs, the clean flat body side. So it looks a lot like some of those first generation Broncos, and they did a really nice job on it. There is the GOAT, which is their internal code name for the 1966 Bronco project at Ford. And now they've turned that GOAT into goes over any type of terrain, which is, what they use to describe kind of their modes of transportation. So in terms of sand, slippery, sport, eco, normal, there's a bunch of different modes that you could use when you're driving your Bronco. And it kind of goes back to that GOAT, which is goes over any type of terrain. And number 2 on my list was, the flexibility with the roof and the doors. So this is kind of a first for Ford in a while, right? This is something that the Jeep Wrangler has been famous for a while. But one of the biggest complaints from the Jeep Wrangler is that there's nowhere to store those removable doors besides in your garage. So you can't take it off mid-trip. You can't, take them off once you're at your destination because then they're just there. So the Bronco solved that, and it's actually pretty cool because the Bronco 4-door comes with a class exclusive removable hardtop middle panel that provides, a second row open air experience without actually removing the rear cap. So there's pictures of it all online. It looks great. We've posted a lot on our social media about it, but once you remove those doors, there's actually a storage bag that it comes with, and you could stow it in the storage compartment in the back of your Bronco. So, if you take it out camping, you take it out for a weekend trip somewhere, it gives you the opportunity and the flexibility to take off the doors, take off the roof whenever you want. And, you're in a better spot than if you were to do it with your Jeep Wrangler and not have anywhere to put those doors. And then number 3 kind of builds on that where it's all about options. So you have the Ford family of Bronco models, which, we talked about, the Bronco Sport, the Bronco 2-door, Bronco 4-door. But then within that, there are just so many different models or trims and so many different packages and features. The combinations are really endless with this, so you could really get what you want. But some of the different trim levels within those models, the base one, the Big Bend it's called, Black Diamond, Outer Banks, Badlands, Wild Track, First Edition. I mean, there's some cool ones within there that give you different types of features, whatever is kind of best for your driving and, whatever luxury features you want within your Bronco. And something else that's going to be really cool for us is the fact that, Roush Performance is going to get behind this Bronco, and they're going to have some performance packages that you're going to be able to add on to it. So I think that's really exciting for us in particular because we're one of, the top Roush Performance dealer groups in the Northeast. We do really well with our Roush trucks, our Roush Mustangs. So I can't wait at the possibility of, what they're going to come up with for a Roush Bronco. Number 4 on my list of the coolest things about the new Bronco family was the fact that it is just going to be an adventurer's dream. So you could live in the outdoors with this thing. It's going to be really popular for anybody that likes camping trips, hiking trips, anything like that. And I think they did a really nice job with some of the setups within it. So it's really built to get down and dirty if you want it to, and, go across a river if you wanted to, a small stream. In terms of, you could get it dirty, you could get it wet on the inside. The buttons are finished in rubber so that it's protected against that dirt and water. The floor is made rubberized so that it's easier to wash. So they really took a lot of that into consideration, making it, trail ready and off-road ready, and not just ready, but, easier to manage, easier to deal with after the fact. I think it's going to be really cool for anybody that really wants to just take it out and go. Next on the list that I found to be really cool is the Powertrain Choices. So, you're going to have a bunch of different engine options. That's what Ford does with all of their trucks and SUVs. They do a very nice job with it. And it's going to range from, the lower end of the 1.5 EcoBoost. That's going to be 4x4 and have 181 horsepower. And you could go all the way up to, having best-in-class 310 horsepower with the 2.7-liter EcoBoost, again, 4x4. So there's a wide range of different engines that you could get, engine combinations, transmission, combinations in terms of there's manual transmission available, the 8-speed automatic transmission. So you could really go from, it depends how crazy you want to get with it, but you could get the most powerful engine, the best in this class at the 310 horsepower. So it's just nice to have those options with the powertrains. So I mentioned best in class with that last point. Number 6 on the list, though, is just dedicated to best in class. So Ford really went over the top with this one, I think. I think they're projecting it out to be best in class in just a ton of things. And that was the point, right? They're trying to take market share right away with this. They're trying to just dominate the class with the entire family of Ford Bronco SUVs. So, there's a long list of things that they think they're going to be best in class in. I'll say a couple of them. So the departure angle and the breakover angle, the ground clearance, the crawl ratio. So those are all kind of things that have to do with, off-roading. But it's going to have best-in-class cargo room behind the front row, best-in-class second row, and overall openness. So that's when the top is removed and the doors are removed. And then with the engines, you get best-in-class gasoline 4-cylinder torque, best-in-class 6-cylinder gasoline power, and then their 245 horsepower Bronco Sport is going to be a best-in-class in terms of horsepower and torque for that 2.0-liter EcoBoost Advanced 4x4 on that Bronco Sport. So, again, they went above and beyond, in my opinion, so far with what they're trying to accomplish, what they're trying to beat in the marketplace right now. And I think they will. I truly believe in this vehicle, and I think it is going to dominate in terms of the class that those models are in. And then to round out my list of the 7 coolest things about the new Bronco family from my blog post, kind of a minor one, but it's the naming convention of things. I think they did a really cool job, and it's a lot of fun names. And, sometimes some of these manufacturers are a little stuffy and they don't want to go outside of the box with some of the stuff. But, just some of the color options I thought were really cool, like cactus gray, antimatter blue, cyber orange. My personal favorite is Area 51. It's a really nice blue and gray. And then, with some of the trims that I mentioned before, Big Ben, Outer Banks, Badlands, Black Diamond, Wild Track. They have a package called the Sasquatch package. So, they did a lot of really cool things with just tweaking some of the names and really honoring the outdoor and the off-roading feel that this new Bronco family is going to have. And then the very last one is just an honorable mention. I had to do it. Just a cool little thing they put in, but the Bronco actually comes with a bottle opener in the cargo area. There's a cool picture of it on our social media pages, but it's pretty cool. It's perfect for camping. Obviously, they're advertising it as it's for non-drinking events and, strongly against drunk driving and drinking and driving. But it's just a nice little feature for the tailgate when you're out, hiking, camping, any of those things. Just a cool little thing that's part of the Bronco now. All right, so that's my list of the 7 coolest things that I felt personally about the Bronco announcement and what is going to come out when, the Bronco family hits our showroom, which, again, hopefully is by December at this point. Okay, on to the NFL and the football part of this podcast. So I'm going to try and speed through this because I know I went a little bit over with my excitement level for the Bronco and talking about some of the history and some of the new features coming out. So my initial goal was to keep this podcast under 15 minutes. That didn't even last one episode, I don't think. So then I tried to keep it under 20. With this one being about the Bronco, I realized it ran a little extra. So thanks for sticking with me up until this point, but I'll get into the NFL part of my podcast. All right. So as I have been doing the last 2 weeks, I try and have a little fun, try and make some predictions about the NFL, tying them into our Ford models. So I have a Shelby F-150 size pick, a Ford Explorer size pick, and a Ford EcoSport size pick. I'm doing this with the spread. I think that's a clarification I got called out on by some of our listeners from the first 2 weeks. I didn't mention the spread, and that's what the picks were for. So it is always with the spread. Last week, I actually went 3-0. I had the Packers who killed the Lions. I had the Rams who defeated the Eagles. I was very excited about that. I'm a Giants fan. And then I took the Bengals over the Browns, and with the spread, they covered. They only lost by 5, and the spread was 6. So in total, so far after the first 2 weeks, I'm 5-1, so it's not too bad. So let's get into my Week 3 picks. All right, so real quick with the Week 3 NFL picks. So for my Shelby F-150 size pick, I'm going to go with the Cardinals over the Lions. For my Ford Explorer size pick of the week, I'm going with the Seahawks over the Cowboys. And then the Ford EcoSport pick of the week is going to be the Chargers over the Panthers. All of those spreads, all the teams I picked are all favored by in between basically a field goal and a touchdown right now. So we'll see how it goes, and I'll be back at it next week.
Well, everyone can afford it, all